Hello, and you're listening to EcoJustice Radio. We present environmental and climate stories from a social justice frame, featuring voices not necessarily heard on mainstream media. EcoJustice Radio acknowledges that we record the show on the traditional territory of the Tongva and all of their relatives. Welcome. I am Jack Ide. On today's show, Joanna Macy on the Great Turning. In honor of her 95th birthday, we air a 2002 talk featuring the acclaimed elder, Joanna Macy, eco-philosopher, author, and Buddhist scholar, as well as an interview Carrie Kim did with her in 2018. Joanna Macy is the founder of The Work That Reconnects, a groundbreaking framework and methodology for personal and social change. She's an international spokesperson for anti-nuclear causes, peace, justice, and environmentalism. Most renowned for her book, Coming Back to Life, Practices to Reconnect Our Lives, Our World, and the Great Turning Initiative, which deals with the transformation from, as she terms it, an industrial growth society to what she considers to be a more sustainable civilization. Her work addresses psychological and spiritual issues, Buddhist thought, and contemporary science, and helps people transform despair and apathy into, constructive, collaborative action, something we could use a little more of today. The Work That Reconnects sees the world reality told in three stories: business as usual, the great unraveling, and the great turning. The third story, the great turning, it's kind of what we're hoping we're in, because it's about time that we get a turn. And let's just call it a turn for the better. And that's really what she's all about, is seeing through all of this smoke screen that we're living through as really progress. And, she's not just making it up. So you got to really get behind and follow what Joanna Macy's saying here. It's the epical transition from an industrial growth society to a life-sustaining civilization. We begin with an excerpt of a talk given at Salt Spring Island in British Columbia in 2002, courtesy of the Salt Spring Video Channel.
Thank you for coming out tonight. Yeah, I thought that I was coming to a little island, funny-shaped island, off the coast of Vancouver, and I realized I've come to the heart of the world. What I've experienced here is, thank you so much for giving people a sense of the wealth of these few days. 2 of them were spent, I didn't say a word. I was in silence. I was soaking up this place, and I was also thinking of how in the new paradigm of thinking, which is actually an ancient one, you find that the center is everywhere. And the center of the Great Turning is here, too. That was the wonderful definition of God by Nicholas of Cusa, that 15th century cardinal, and you can believe it got him in trouble with the church back then. But when he said, God is an infinite sphere whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. There's nowhere outside it. And that's what this great turning is like, and that's what I'm experiencing here. What I've learned about what has been going on here, what you have dared to confront, and the kind of courage and ingenuity that you have manifested, and the plans that you're cooking up. I mean, with the lands that from Texada, am I saying it right? That organic school for organic gardening, and then plans for a seed bank, and the kind of, but that's only part of it, these new structures, because with it is the links between you all, the trust that's happened, and the respect that's happened when you've worked together. So you're right. You're not on an island separate from the world. You're at the heart of what is happening. And I would like to celebrate that by calling up on this next to me here. I was about to say stage, but it's right up here. And if you don't have a very good view of the people that will be standing next to me, it's all right, because you're going to have to use your imagination. You won't see them with your physical eyes. But I want to celebrate the kinds of people that you rank with now, that I am taking such comfort and inspiration in, as I will in you when I go home and when I go forth from here. So please welcome João Pedro and Amalia de Souza of Sao Paulo. They are working with the native peoples down there and also with the landless workers movement. They are displaying incredible tenacity against the violence of the system. And over on this side, Scott. He is a nuclear engineer who, recent graduate, brilliant, went to work for the nuclear laboratory nearest me, the Lawrence Livermore Lab, and for a very fine salary, and he found that what they had promised him was not accurate. They promised him he could work on conversion. He's designing new nuclear bombs and new nuclear weapons, and so he resigned. So Scott, come right up here. I'm inviting up here Kaisha. She's a Kazakh woman, a biologist, who has, during and after the huge nuclear tests at Semipalatinsk, in Kazakhstan was the great Soviet testing site, she began to notice and began to measure and began to study the effects. And what she set into motion contributed to the final shutdown of that testing site, which is really shut down, not like what my country is doing at the Nevada test site. And now she is working with environmental activists, especially women in that predominantly Muslim country, to help them become leaders in the rural area. Kaisha. I want to invite up here Oscar of Cochabamba. He was the shoemaker who led the protest that closed down Bechtel Corporation's privatization of water. And please, gorgeous Wangari Maathai, that Kenyan woman who started the Green Belt movement that has planted millions of trees and branched out from there to do community organizing, democratizing at the grassroots level. Wangari. Two women from India, Mehta Patkar and Arundhati Roy, who are insisting that the people who are displaced by the Narmada Dam, the millions of peasants, that they be not uprooted like that, and to the point of standing in the water as the areas were flooded, and they're still not giving up, despite violence, despite everything. Welcome, Mehta and Arundhati. I want to welcome up here Oleg from St. Petersburg. As a matter of fact, my husband Fran is probably with him right now. Oleg was a nuclear engineer at the great mega reactor complex that made submarine reactors for the Soviet Union in Sosnovy Bor. Same types as the Chernobyl reactor, now stuck together. You can imagining, with chewing gum and scotch tape, but it's still working, and he resigned, and he started a deep ecology center, and he is taking teachers and students on wilderness walks, and he's organizing with them and friends in Norway and around the Baltics a nuclear-free Baltic. Oh, yay. And I want to invite up here a little group of women that I was just speaking to Peter Levitt about yesterday. That meeting them, working with them has been so amazing. Marcia, Dorit, Judith of Tel Aviv and Tzfat and Jerusalem. And they have been working over the years with a healing program with their counterparts, nourishing friendship in Nablus. And they called me a couple of weeks ago, right before the Sharon's troops moved into Nablus, to say, Joanna, we want you to know that we are going in there and we are going to share the fate of our Palestinian brothers and sisters. They didn't make it. When they got to the border, it was too late, but they're talking by phone many times a day. They said, the reason why we can do this, see, is although the Israelis have cut down the power in the food and the water and the cell phones, we gave the cell phone to them, so it's based in Israel, so we can call up and talk. And what they're planning, you know what they're planning? They are planning the healing programs that they are going to bring to the children in the West Bank and in Israel when the violence is over. They know that the trauma will be deep and lasting, and they are going to be practicing together what had first brought them together, which is therapeutic touch and homeopathy. And lastly, folks I was with just a few weeks ago, Vinya, Ari, Sadiva, Charika, and Krishna from Sri Lanka. These come right in. They are from this island that has been riven by civil war for the last 19 years, with spirals of revenge and retaliation and suicide bombers on both sides, escalating violence. How many times we lost hope, and now peace is breaking out. It can happen. And these friends that I've invited up, I know through the Sarvodaya movement. It's a Buddhist community organizing movement, Buddhist inspired, includes people of all faiths. And they had decided 2 years ago that they were going to start holding peace meditations to change what they call, we're going to change the psychosphere. And they started doing this. And on February, a ceasefire was signed. A prime minister was elected on a peace mandate, and a peace was brokered with the Norwegian help with the guerrilla fighters, the Tamil Tigers, rebels. And within days, they said, okay, we want to hold this ceasefire. There have been other ceasefires, but they couldn't last. They were sabotaged each time. We're going to hold a Maha Samadhi, Shanti Samadhi, a big peace meditation, and we're going to call 500,000 people, and we're going to have it at the sacred city of Anuradhapura, which is right up where the fighting was. Well, you know, when I heard that, I decided I got to go. So I went. And in spite of a bomb being tossed at our house the night before to scare us away, we went, and I had the experience of sitting in meditation. So first, anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing in and out. Then metta meditation, loving kindness. Then adhisthana, which is resolve. Resolve for peace. And in that made the biggest silence I ever heard. It was a silence of 650 100,000 people. You could have heard a pin drop. Well, but you heard a little rustling of the breeze in the trees. I came back knowing that that's possible. I came back knowing what it sounds like when the machine guns stop firing and the landmines stop exploding and the bombs stop being dropped. That kind of silence. We're capable of that. We're capable of that kind of resolve together. So all these people, it's pretty crowded up here with me. And but what do they have in common? They have in common a belief that a better world is possible. A better world than one where toxins are fabricated for money and dumped into the waters, the air, and the streams. A better world is possible than when the ancient old growth goes, great beings are chopped down, often just for pulp and chips, by absentee owners. A better world is possible than that in which half the people of our world, 3 billion people, don't get enough to eat, while a few get obscenely rich. A better world is possible than where slave labor in investment promotion zones around the world, stitched together our clothes or our athletic equipment. They know a better world is possible than that, and they have a commitment to it, a commitment that is so free and so fulfilling that their creativity wells up, like you guys, like what's happening here. The will of Earth herself, that great intelligence pouring through us now, we're beginning to get out of our own way and to know what our belonging to each other and with each other in the web of life, that we've been given life in this exquisite planet. And these people, I've invited them up because they, like you then, are part of a tidal change that can shape the future and that is shaping the future. And this is what some of us are calling, there are many words for it, calling the Great Turning. It is this transition from a doomed industrial growth society. I say doomed because it's unsustainable. It's unsustainable because it is addicted to growth. It has to keep growing. It's pathetic, isn't it? It has to keep growing. Growing in what? Well, not wisdom and grace. Growing in one thing only, profits, corporate profits. And how do you do that? Well, you extract elements right out of the living body of Earth and you turn them into consumer goods and weapons and waste as fast as you can. And it's that throughput, as fast as possible, where the money comes in. Now, it's been decades already when what we were taking out exceeded the capacity of the Earth to renew it. And what we were dumping at waste at the other end was exceeding the Earth's capacity to absorb it. So we have been for quite a while now on what the systems thinkers call on runaway, on overshoot, out of control, spinning out of control with exponential growth in the money. And the money's sloshing around the planet where it can turn this or that into a commodity. So now the very water that we need, and soon the very air, will be turned into commodities that can earn a profit for somebody.
You have been listening to a talk given by eco-philosopher Joanna Macy from 2002, courtesy of the Salt Spring video channel. Hey listeners, quick break here. We hope that you're enjoying EcoJustice Radio. Stay connected by subscribing on all major podcast apps and visit our website, ecojusticeradio.org, to check out previous shows and guests, listen to extended episodes, and get connected with us on social media. Today you're listening to Joanna Macy on The Great Turning. I'm your host, Jack Hite, and we feature a talk with, of course, the acclaimed elder Joanna Macy, eco-philosopher, author, and Buddhist scholar, on the occasion of her 95th birthday, as well as we feature an interview that Carrie Kim did with her in 2018. Now we return to a talk given in 2002 by Joanna Macy, courtesy of the Salt Spring video channel.
Well, That's not going to last, so we are in the process of a transition, a revolution to a life-sustaining civilization. And it's good to realize, in a way that we don't have to take this system apart so much. We don't have to conquer it because it's doing a good job by itself. It is a self-destructive. But if you're totally invested in this political economy, you can't think about that. And if you're totally invested in this kind of political economy, war makes sense. War, indeed, is inevitable because you've got to assure your supplies and you've got to protect your supply lines and you've got to expand the markets, and weapons making is hugely profitable. So, surprise, we find ourselves at war. My country, the one remaining superpower, as we tirelessly tell ourselves and anyone who will listen, is at war. Do we need a clearly defined enemy? No. No, not if you make it a war against terrorism. Or better yet, you can make it a war against evil. Then it can be permanent. Then it can be ubiquitous. And indeed, the war plans that they don't even bother classifying them, and their statements by our Secretary of Defense, Rumsfeld, and the U.S. Space Command makes it very clear what we feel that we need to do right out into the control of space. But that's not the final answer, because this turning is underway. It's a revolution, actually. It's the biggest revolution since, it's the third revolution of this magnitude that we know about. And one of my teachers, Lester Brown of the World Watch Institute, and now founder of the Earth Policy Institute, and others, points out that the first revolution of comparable magnitude to what we're going on now, that I'm calling the Great Turning, was the agricultural revolution. And that took centuries. And the second revolution, that came along a bunch later, the Industrial Revolution, and that took generations. In some cases with technology transfer to the global south, but you can do that in a decade. And then right on the heels of that, this what he calls ecological revolution, or the environmental revolution, or the great work, as theologian Thomas Berry calls it, or the great turning, as I've been calling it with a lot of our colleagues. Imagining that phrase calls forth in my mind how the future generations will look back. They're going to look back in just a few generations at us here in these opening years of the third millennium, and they'll say, oh boy, those ancestors back then, they were part of the Great Turning, that huge shift from a suicidal political economy to a life-sustaining one. They were in the thick of it, and they didn't even know whether they could pull it off or not. I have to hand it to them. Actually, it's true. We don't know whether we can pull it off or not. And what's liberating when we look at this, because I know this revolution is happening, this great turning is taking place right now, that affirmation is balanced by the fact, to be perfectly honest, we don't know whether we can pull it off. We don't know whether it will happen in time to stop the unraveling of the living systems of Earth. But there's no guarantee. And it's good just to pause. Let me just pause here a moment. Because you know that there are people out there who, I'm sure nobody in this room, but people who don't get involved, who don't join this campaign or that one because they say, well, I'm not sure it'll make all the difference. Well, whoever is. So we remind ourselves of the basic uncertainty of life. We remind ourselves that, say, when you fall in love, there's no guarantee you're going to have a lasting, gorgeous relationship. Or when you plant a garden and put the seeds in the ground, there's no guarantee you're going to have a great harvest. And you go into labor, there's no guarantee you're going to end up with a healthy baby. If I if I could plant, had some little capsule to plant in your mind or mine, the notion, everything's going to be all right, you wouldn't believe me. And if you would believe it, with that assurance, everything's going to be just hunky-dory. Don't worry, it looks a little chancy now. Would that call forth from you the greatest courage and creativity? Would it now? So it's when you don't know, you never know, you can come alive to everything you ever knew about courage and about creativity. That's our chance now. So we don't wait around for a sure thing, or wait, like the coach of a team way behind. It's the last inning, and he gets there with them, and he says, the other team is way ahead. But so just relax, you'll make it. He hardly does that. They're way behind, but you can still do it. So we take our uncertainty as a friend, as a companion. Helps you feel awake. Now this, having said that, let me just say a few things about the Great Turning. I'm going to talk about the 3 dimensions of it, and then I'm going to give 4 guidelines. Like a good Buddhist, I like enumerating things. Well, I was brought up a Presbyterian. I just stopped myself, and I'm thinking, did we enumerate things the way the Buddhists did? Well, there were the 10 Commandments. Well, we'll discuss that later. Okay, I am going to tell you about the 3 dimensions of the Great Turning, and I am so glad that you're not taking notes on paper, because you mustn't write them down in a list. That might suggest that one is more important than the other or comes before the other. Actually, these are all concurrent and mutually supportive. So you're going to write them on your body. First, write on your hands. This first dimension is the holding actions. Now, these are what most people think of as activism. These are all the political, legislative, regulatory, legal actions to slow down the destruction of the industrial growth society. And the direct actions as well, the blockades and the boycotts, the civil disobedience and other forms of refusal, to slow it down. Now this is really important because it saves some lives, and it saves some species and some ecosystems, and it saves some of the genetic material for the gene pool, for this life-sustaining civilization that's emerging. It gets a lot of glory. It's also hard. It's also exhausting. It can burn you out. You're right up there, flying point, and you just sometimes, and the thing that's sad is that when people step back because it gets so bruised doing this, particularly with increasing violence against activists, you just look at Quebec City or Genoa or others. But when they step back, they think that they're abandoning, or they suspect, or they feel bad that they're abandoning ship. Well, you're not. When you step back from the holding actions, you might be just rotating back, like the lead goose is said to do, moving from the point position and flying in the slipstream of the others. Catch your breath. You're probably engaging in the Great Turning in another way. So this is really important, but it's not enough. It's not enough. Because you've got to build with the new ways of doing things and new institutions for the life-sustaining civilization. Well, this is happening. And where we write this, I think we'll write it on our foreheads, because that takes a lot of ingenuity. And I certainly know, and I saw that wonderful video a year ago by Rankin about, what's it, the time, the money. That was incredible. I was already in love with you before I even came here. And so you know about the holding actions, and you know the toll it takes. You also know how beautiful it is, how the heart breaks open. But that's not enough. We've got to build the alternatives, the new ways of doing things, the new institutions. And these, I'm telling you, they are sprouting up now at a phenomenal rate. Probably there has been no time in human history where so many new ways of doing things and old is reaching back before the Industrial Growth Society into old wisdom, earth wisdom traditions, and indigenous wisdom. There's probably no time in human history where these new ways have sprouted so fast. And I say sprouted, I see them coming up like sprouts amidst the rubble of a dysfunctional civilization. And if you squint a little bit, you can sort of see a film of green. You have to really look, because it's not evident on the evening news and the corporate-controlled media and the headlines. You're not going to see it. It's not in the interests of the power holders or the corporations or the politicians in their pay that we know what is happening in the Great Turning. So we have to look. But a lot of it's happening right here. And there are new ways of growing food, and there are new ways of holding the land, and there are new ways of, and old ways of building structures, and there are new ways of measuring what our wealth is, new indicators of sustainability, new technologies, using the power of the sun and the wind and the biomass, new forms of fair trade, new ways of learning. But you know, all these new institutions, they're going to just shrivel and die unless they're deeply rooted in our values and who we think we are, what we think we need. And so we need a third dimension to the Great Turning. And we'll write it right here in our heart-mind. This is where the mind is put in many traditions like the Buddhist. And that's the shift in consciousness. And that is happening at a phenomenal rate of speed. Do you know that when I was in college 50 years ago, there wasn't a breath about the earth as a living system? There wasn't a breath of reference to the earth as anything more than inert matter to be mined and extracted from for our wealth. It's amazing how things have changed. And the rituals that are coming up, and the poetry that is coming up, and it's a spiritual revolution, and their tidal change coming from the past and from the other religions, teaching us reverence, breaching the dichotomies between our minds. We're realizing we're not just brains on the end of a stick, but that we are embodied in this incredible web of life, and all of it is intelligent. And that with this spiritual, cognitive, scientific revolution, that's why I teach systems theory, teach it at Graduate Theological Union, but what I'm teaching comes out of biology. The living systems, that how you understand a world made of relationships.
That was Joanna Macy on The Great Turning. For the entire video of this talk, look up Salt Spring Video Channel on YouTube. Hey listeners, quick break here. We hope that you're enjoying EcoJustice Radio. Stay connected by subscribing on all major podcast apps and visit our website, ecojusticeradio.org, to check out previous shows and guests, listen to extended episodes, and get connected with us on social media. Today you're listening to Joanna Macy on The Great Turning. I'm your host, Jack Hite, and we feature a talk with, of course, the acclaimed elder Joanna Macy, eco-philosopher, author, and Buddhist scholar, on the occasion of her 95th birthday, as well as we feature an interview that Carrie Kim did with her in 2018. Following is our interview with Joanna Macy from 2018, recorded at the studios of KPFK in Los Angeles, featuring our host, Carrie Kim.
Aloha! You're listening to EcoJustice Radio. My name is Carrie Kim, and today we are honored to be joined by Joanna Macy. Joanna Macy, eco-philosopher and Buddhist scholar. She has dedicated her life to the study of Buddhism, general systems theory, and deep ecology. A visionary leader, grassroots organizer, and compassionate voice, she's committed 5 decades to the movements for peace, justice, and ecology. She founded The Work That Reconnects, a groundbreaking framework and methodology for personal and social change. She's the author of numerous books, including Active Hope, How to Face the Mess We're In Without Going Crazy, written with Chris Johnstone. She's empowered thousands of people worldwide to transform the despair and apathy caused by overwhelming social and ecological crises into constructive, collaborative action. She invites others to invoke a new way of seeing the world to support the continuance of life. Welcome, Joanna.
Hi, Carrie. So glad to be with you.
We are thrilled to have you with us. You've been involved for many, many years translating the work of poet Rainer Maria Rilke. And we are wondering if you could share with us the sonnet to Orpheus, which you've said has helped you a great deal in this time.
Yes, it has. It was written in the 1920s, close before his early death. And I hope I'd be delighted to share it because I think it's contagious in its sense of perseverance. So here goes. Quiet friend who has come so far, feel how your breathing makes more space around you. Let this darkness be a bell tower, and you the bell. And as you ring, what batters you becomes your strength. So move back and forth into the changes. What's it like, this intensity of pain? Oh, if the drink is bitter, turn yourself to wine. In this uncontainable night, be the mystery at the crossroads of your senses, the meaning discovered there. And if the world has ceased to hear you, say to the silent earth, I flow, and to the rushing waters speak, I am.
So pertinent, so relevant for right now. Thank you so much for those words. It's very powerful for us to hear that. You know, I wanted to go back in time to 65 when you were in India with your husband working with the Peace Corps. As over, half a century ago now, believe it or not, you recounted it as one of your most profound experiences, even to this day, and as something more real than you would ever, anything you'd ever experienced. And I'm wondering why.
Yeah, well, it still strengthens me as I remember it and as I breathe with it, and it was an experience of being bigger than the self that I'd become accustomed to think of was Joanna, that this was bigger than the bag of skin that separated me from the world, that there was, just as the Buddha had said, and just as deep ecology says about the ecological self, we are far bigger. Ourselves are far more extensive than this socially constructed, skin-encapsulated ego.
Mm-hmm. Can you share what you experienced working with the Tibetan refugees out there and their notion of self?
That they weren't trapped in watching themselves to see how good or how correct or how upbeat or how discouraged. They had lost everything. They had faced death and snow blindness as they crossed over the high Himalayan passes and carrying all they had on their backs. But there was no self-pity. Boy, did that hit me. Mm-hmm. To be free of always watching yourself and judging yourself, and am I good enough, or am I strong enough, or am I whatever enough? Mm-hmm. And to identify yourself simply with the privilege of being alive now in this moment, and the privilege of having a choice of how to be. That's liberation.
Absolutely. Yeah, you've spoken so much about the hyper-individualism of American culture.
Yes, I think that cripples us far more than we realize. Mm-hmm. And this is a beauty of this moment that we're alive in, is that we can begin to experience not only for ourselves, but for others, and through what we choose to do, that we can be free of this. Because that's what leads capitalism and the consumer society is built on. Mm-hmm. It's small, needy, never enough, never good enough, never pretty enough. You don't smell right, you don't look right, you don't drive the right car, whatever. We keep being reduced to this pathetic notion of whereas our true nature is vast.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And with that, as an activist, sure you get discouraged, sure you get frustrated, sure you get angry, but it passes because you realize that in your depths of being, you are far bigger than that. And then when you're that big, when you experience that larger self, then the earth herself, because our earth is alive, can begin to act through you.
Mm-hmm. How do you envision American society breaking free of this notion of a separate self and the pursuit of private fulfillment? I mean, we have selfies, we have McMansions, we're witnessing, sort of a both-and situation where some people are reclaiming more of a communal way of operating in the world and collaborating, and others are maybe going further down that other path of materialism.
Well, we've been so maimed, and that it can't be. There'll always be people who will find it harder, and it's harder when you are yourself hungry or cold or jobless, and it's very hard not to just think of where you're going to get the next meal. But we have in power in the White House this figure that demonstrates the essential pathos of the ego-identified narcissist. He's taken hyper-individualism to its ridiculous and tragic extent, don't you think?
Mm. Yeah, I think we've seen that plenty this year. I have a mentor who calls hope a 4-letter word, and you've said there was a time when you avoided using the word hope. So what does hope mean to you now?
That's true. Well, yeah, because I thought that it was, I remember hearing myself say hope is a killer. For one thing, it takes you out of the present moment, and it makes you be too vulnerable to upsets and rejections or difficulties. But the big thing came to me and that was just actually in the process of writing the book you mentioned, Active Hope, that hope isn't something you have. It's something you do. Mm-hmm. And it's there, so that means it's in the actions you choose to take. And so you can, it can be something that you do even when you're feeling hopeless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've said hope is a verb, yes?
That's right.
You this year we've witnessed so many climate-driven natural disasters on an unprecedented scale, and you've said that people can't look at the devastation we're causing to our planet, not because they're apathetic, but actually because they care so much that they have to avoid the pain of the world, that the other face of our pain is our love for the world. So how do you encourage people to engage the pain and the love?
I think the key is to not be afraid of the pain, our moral pain, or our not be afraid of the suffering that we feel or that we inflict on ourselves or on others. Not be afraid of the suffering. We see plenty of it, and we're going to see more. Mm-hmm. And to realize that our mainstream culture has pathologized that pain, presented it as something unfortunate and neurotic. Mm-hmm. If there was some weakness in our separate individual self, maybe we were abused as children or whatever. But actually, to suffer with the world is a wholesome and indeed beautiful expression of our humanity. It's the literal meaning of compassion. So we don't, and once we're not afraid of the suffering, then, Carrie, nothing can stop us. So let's stop feeling so tender about our precious feelings, or taking our pulse all the time is how we feel. Of course we're going to feel grief with the griefs of others, grief of the homeless, with the hungry, with the people who don't have any, still in darkness from in Puerto Rico, all over the world.
Yeah.
When with our non-human brothers and sisters. Of course, but that's part of our solidarity.
Absolutely. Joanna, would you say that without experiencing or allowing ourselves to feel the grief of the world, and even especially the environmental destruction that we're witnessing, that we can also not feel so much our obligation to it?
And if we don't, or much else either, we don't allow ourselves to feel our pain for the world, then we're not going to feel that as much joy or either. We get sort of numb.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's
And when people are afraid that if they feel they're suffering for the world, they'll be mired in despair and grief. And that's just the opposite, because it's only a feeling. And we're only stuck with it if we refuse to feel it.
Absolutely.
Or acknowledge it. But it's just a feeling passes. So some of in the work I do around, in the work that reconnects, once people express, and oh boy, and it gets loud and crazy and wet, and how people feel. And then it also, almost in the next breath, there's hilarity and there's love.
And a release, yes, of everything that they're holding.
Like coming more alive.
Would you say that the world's current climate crisis is fundamentally a spiritual crisis?
And yes, and a perceptual crisis. I think that we don't allow ourselves to think or come to consciousness around where we are and who we are. I mean, here we are in the most thrilling moment of our planetary journey, where both science and spirituality are revealing for almost anyone to see that our Earth is not just a storehouse or a sewer. It's living. It's a living system. And we are a living part of this living body of Earth. What a time to be able to join and work for this. And I think that although the media certainly doesn't devote any space to revealing this, I think this is spreading around the world, that more and more people are acting on behalf of the larger system.
Yes.
Larger, the Earth itself.
Yes, I see that absolutely we are waking up to that. As I said, it's kind of a both and times. And could you speak about the Great Turning and what that is?
Yeah, I think that it's clear that there's a transition underway to a life, I won't say a sustainable society, because that word has been misused, but a life-sustaining culture. And this is probably the biggest revolution. And I agree with the social thinkers that say it's the biggest revolution since the agricultural revolution 10,000 years ago, or the industrial revolution. We are seeing that we have to fit in with the laws and patterns and rights of the natural world, or we're goners.
Yeah, we are one species of many millions of species.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would like to ask you, given that this country was founded upon a legacy of genocide and imperialism, especially against indigenous peoples, it seems we were destined for a correction. And I wonder if what we're experiencing now you consider, let's say, the U.S.'s karma. I think most of our listeners are familiar with the laws of cause and effect.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there's any question about that. And it's not only that we have stolen the land, but we have grown wealthy with stolen people. And the centuries of slavery are also ready for a
correction. Yes.
Huge. And this is a period where we have to we're opening our eyes to that. And it's very demanding. It's demanding for every one of us. For me, as a white identified woman, it meant seeing things that I hadn't been conditioned to see and know, that are absolutely essential for me to know, to open my mind to what is happening to my brothers and sisters of color in this country and in this world. Because we are, there's a huge karma of colonialism.
Sure.
In our country and actually worldwide.
Yeah, I and it is, as you said, an auspicious time because people are waking up to that, and more people are taking responsibility for that. I mean, maybe it hasn't happened worldwide yet, but there's definitely a shift underway.
That's right. Actually, it's morally beautiful.
Yeah, and people want to come together. I mean, I feel that a lot of the times when you're out, whether it's a rally or a march or you're doing something on behalf of a cause much greater than ourselves, that is the whole reason people want to do that. They want to come together. There's a part of them that wants to be in community with others because this society is so isolating. If you just stay in
I think you're totally right, Carrie. There's a huge longing for this mutual belonging, because that is we're made for that.
Yes.
We're not made to be sitting in an isolation cell.
Absolutely. We should be relational. Does it shock you that we haven't yet implemented a wartime level mobilization on behalf of Mother Earth? I remind myself of Paul Hawken's statements often that, right now there's over 100,000 private companies on the case of climate change and the environment.
Yeah, it is. And yet, down among the young people, it's moving, too, to see how natural it feels to younger people to have their eyes open to what is in store and what is happening, and to shift their identity. Or they don't need to shift their identity. There is a readiness to act, not with a lot of drama and breastfeeding and flag waving, but just very naturally. Oh, yeah, we're here for the earth.
Yes, absolutely. Some activists have an aversion and some have an identification with the word activist. Do you find anything problematic about identifying oneself as an activist?
Well, no. I think it puzzles me that people seem to take it as being aggressively militant or self-righteous. To me, an activist is anybody who acts for something wider than their immediate self-interest.
Mm-hmm. What would you say to the younger generation who might be more angry, or they feel that what the prior generations have left is a very sad inheritance and that we've, acted irresponsibly and negligently? What do you have to say to these younger listeners?
Yeah, well, I would say you can stay with that sense of putting all the blame on the older generations. Totally understandable. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to blame you, but actually it's boring. You're not going to find out. You're not going to have a lot of adventures. You're going to sit with that.
Yeah, not going to solve too much.
Sit there and point at the elders and, okay, if that's the way you want to enjoy life, that there's a lot of adventures out there for you to have that will be, and you can have the experience of those ever-widening circles of self-interest. There's circles of identity and people to work with. So don't waste your time on that, is what I'd want to say to them.
Yeah, and then they miss out on a whole other opportunities for creativity and collaboration with others.
Yeah.
So
you sure do, because there's so much. It's such a thrilling thing to be able to step beyond the consumer self that capitalism is built on, and our whole economic system has been built on, and that keeps us actually infantilized.
Yes, and enslaved in a certain sense. We're experiencing cultural genocide worldwide in the form of globalization and urbanization, and I would like you to comment on the erosion of the world's cultural heritage and the flattening of diversity.
Yeah, this touches one of my greatest sorrows, is that there are cultures and languages that are just winking out so fast, and that once you have a culture go extinct, or a language is a whole precious way to see the world. Our planet expresses herself through a language, through some of these indigenous cultures so exquisitely and unrepeatably. So, Carrie, you just touched a big wound in my heart-mind, and that to go and to hang out with those who are, where you still have these wonderful ways of seeing and being human before, So that's just one more reason to serve this, because it's going to be inevitable. The capitalism is self-destroying. Mm-hmm. Marx was right about that, and that, and maybe it's too late, but that doesn't mean that we can't right now, with appetite and love in our hearts and great curiosity, work with each other in treasuring what we have right now. Yeah.
Final words, Joanna. I'm wondering, what would you most like to see change in your lifetime, given your long-time advocacy for ecological and social justice?
Oh.
Is it too big of a question? Too big of a wish list?
Oh, yeah. Well, I would like to see the United States break up into smaller countries. I never expected to say that.
Yeah, well,
I would like to see people coming together in the streets and not be so acquiescent to the tyranny and folly of those who are temporarily in power. I want to see people taking each other's hands and walking out to demand that the obvious, that the life go on, and the insane policies of the present
Demand that life go on. I like that. Joanna, could you share with us your website and the ways that the listeners can stay in contact with you?
Well, they can write me care of the website for the Work That Reconnects.
The Work That Reconnects.
It's called, and it's work, not the work, but workthatreconnects.org, and they can write me in care of that.
Okay. The workthatreconnects.org, is that right?
Yes, but without the word the.
Okay. Workthatreconnects.org. Listeners, you can connect with Joanna Macy. Stay tuned with her, please. And you have been listening to eco-philosopher and Buddhist scholar Joanna Macy on EcoJustice Radio. Thank you so much, Joanna.
And thank you, Carrie. Lovely to be with you.
We appreciate your wisdom.
Hey, listeners. To check out the extended recording of this show or to explore our other shows, visit our website, ecojusticeradio.org, and subscribe to our podcast. This has been EcoJustice Radio and our show, Joanna Macy on The Great Turning. Thank you to our listeners for joining us. Please connect with us on social media at EcoJustice Radio, SoCal 350, and Wilder Utopia. If you like what you've heard and you want others to be informed, subscribe and share the episodes. You have been listening to EcoJustice Radio, a project of SoCal 350. Executive producer and host, myself, Jack Eit. Co-host Jessica Aldridge, co-host Carrie Kim, and engineer and original music by Blake Quake Beats. And until next time, remember, the power is yours.